welcome to Story Time with One Lonely Farmer. Yeah, story time. So, my house is not on the farm. My house is off the farm. It takes about 2.2 miles from the farm to get to it, but it's not even a mile away from the farm as the crow flies. And I've driven from the farm to my house for 22 years. Over 22 years, almost 23 years I've owned that place. Kind of amazing that I've had it that long. And when I drive down this road about this time of year, I often think of a young man who used to haul hay for us, or lump hay if you're in some parts of the country. But for the most part, hauling hay was taking it off the wagon, putting it in the barn. And my grandfather was alive, so this was in the 70s, late 70s. And what the heck is going on here? The light is bad. Anyway, we would get a crew of kids together from the local high school, and they used to work for like $2.50 an hour moving hay. And back in the 70s, that was pretty good pay. It was a minimum wage or above minimum wage slightly. And these guys would come out, and we would, us kids would annoy the shit out of them because we were young. I mean, I was born in 72. So, but we would annoy them. We would get on the wagon and push the bales down to them. We would help. But there was one kid, he lived in Frenchtown, and he would ride his bicycle to the farm in the morning. Now, I cannot remember his name. I just don't remember his name. I wish I did. I could honor him a little bit more that way if I could remember his name, but I don't. And it's unfortunate because on his way home from, and I remember this day quite vividly, my grandfather would, at the end of the night, when we were done unloading hay, the cows were milked, and it was just before dark, evening, not just before dark, but just say it was evening. You had about an hour before it got dark. He would grab up the boys and take them home because they were all pretty much Kingwood kids. Or Frenchtown or Milford, he had a route, and throw them in the back of the pickup truck or the station wagon. And I do remember on this particular occasion, the boys all jumping in the pickup truck, and this kid that lived in Frenchtown had his bicycle. He says, no, I'm going to ride home on my bike. Well, he wasn't all there. He was a good worker, but he needed constant prompting. I remember this because the other boys kind of took care of him. You're like, hey, come on, let's go faster. Make it, you're stacking it wrong or whatever. Because I was there, I was young. And we could classify him as slow. He was not retarded, but he was slow. Maybe autistic at that time, probably not, because there really weren't that many autistic kids back then at all. And now it's just like every 30th baby born has some form of autism or whatever. That'll tell you a little bit about the environment. And I'm not talking about chemicals and stuff. I'm talking about cell phones and foods that we eat and drugs that we take. Anyways, but neither here nor there. He was slow, but he wanted to ride that bicycle. And I remember my grandfather saying, come on, throw it in the back, and I'll take you home. And, you don't have to ride home. No, and he was adamant about it. Well, he didn't make it home that night, and as I'm driving up there from my house, there was a bowling alley there. It was the Kingwood Lanes back then, and when he would ride his bicycle, he would, swerve out in the road, just do typical dumb kid stuff, and he got hit by a car, and he was killed there, and and after that, we just really didn't hire too much longer after that. There were a few kids that would come out and that we knew when we got into school that would come out. My dad and us kids would do most of the hay. My aunt, my grandmother, we would all work. My grandfather had died in 81, so he was gone. But the sad part was that after that boy was killed, that was pretty much the end of it. We didn't hire like we did back then. It just wasn't worth it. Let's put it that way. It wasn't worth it. So this kid was killed out there, and I remember hearing the sirens and everything going. And back then there were no cell phones, so it was an emergency, but it wasn't that big of an emergency. It was that big of an emergency. It was an emergency, but it took time to get from the car. When the people that hit this kid had to find a place to make a phone call. Now, at the bowling alley, it might have been open. There was a payphone in there. I remember it because I used to bowl there. But yeah, so the time that they took to get to the kid, check him out, see if he was okay, whatever, go to the bowling alley, make the 911 call, and get the ambulance, the fire company, the police, and everything else there, because the station wasn't on Route 12. It was in Flemington at that time, or up in Jutland, and they, or Newton. It would take a while for the police to get there unless there was somebody close. But the rescue squad was right there in Baptisttown, and he died. And that was just the end of it. So there's a story. Not an enjoyable one, but that was that. I wish I remember the kid's name, but it was in the late 70s, 78, 79. I think it was after my grandfather had his heart attack. And the parents then moved out of Frenchtown, and they lived over there at the end of Baker Road, across from where Leon Sod's original farm was on Oak Summit. And they lived there for many, many years. But we called them the Germans. And the reason I called them the Germans, I didn't know who they were until later. But they had, they would go to the restaurant where my girlfriend worked. And I remember talking with them, and they said that their son was killed on Route 12 years ago, 10 years ago, and they were there. And they missed their son dearly. And I put two and two together, and that's who it was. So anyways, there's a bit of a sad story about Pandy Farm and the history here. And farm accidents, even though this had nothing to do with us other than he was riding home on his bicycle from working. My grandfather gave the money that he had earned to his parents, which, was the right thing to do. But my grandfather paid. I think the money was in his pocket, because I remember my grandfather paid every day. At the end of the day, those kids got paid for what they did. And I remember one time, now, did you work hard? Yeah, I worked hard. And then he would ask the other boys, did he work hard? Yeah, he worked hard. He earned his money, and yeah, that was years ago. But anyway, yeah, thanks for watching.